China and Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, or FOCAC, I should say. It is one of those tricky ones you don't quite want to say quickly. But that summit, which officially gets underway tomorrow, the China-Africa Joint Arbitration Centre held a legal forum. 50 legal professionals from Africa and China met to talk about the rapid development of trade and investment between China and Africa, which has necessitated the establishment of a China-Africa dispute resolution mechanism. Well, to unpack all this for us, we're joined by Advocate Michael Kuper, the chairman of the China-Africa Joint Arbitration Centre. A very good morning to you, Advocate. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, that word that I stumbled on, I'm going to ask you just to elaborate for us. What are we talking about here?
We're talking about the way China tries to do business with various countries in Africa. And what it does is it arranges to draw together interested stakeholders, so that from the legal community, for example, China would be interested in establishing, in a spirit of mutual cooperation, a legal framework in which trade and investment can take place. And that was the focus of the legal FOCAC, which has been convened in Johannesburg as a preliminary to the ministerial and head of state FOCAC. And that's what we did. We got together with Angolan and Zimbabwean and, of course, Chinese parties, particularly represented by the China Law Society, and created and established an arbitration authority in order to provide Chinese and African business with a dispute resolution mechanism, which should operate to facilitate and strengthen trade and investment flows. And that's what we've done, and that's been the establishment of the China-Africa Joint Arbitration Centre.
What necessitated that establishment? What was perhaps wrong with status quo at that time that led to this particular arrangement?
Well, if you imagine a whole series of trade flows, contracts and commercial relationships, and you get disputes inevitably arising between the participants in those transactions. And the question is, how do the participants resolve those difficulties? The lack of a shared mechanism has been felt very acutely. The business people otherwise are left with the option of going to a foreign court, and worldwide that is not attractive to business. So they seek some form of joint dispute resolution. And China and Africa has lacked that mechanism in order to reinforce and strengthen their commercial relationships, and hence the creation of this arbitration body.
According to your knowledge, does South Africa have a similar arrangement with our other trading partners? Why is it so important that we have this particular agreement with China?
Well, firstly, because China is really the most active generator of trade and business in our sector of the world. But we've been shut out of participation in international arbitration. South Africa, which is the engine room of commerce in this part of Africa, indeed in Africa, should have arbitral mechanisms as part of its financial services. And it's lacked that. It's lacked that because it did not have its own legislative framework, and the government is now enacting the legislation which should put us on a par with any country in the world when it comes to international arbitration. And we were honoured by China's choice of South Africa as the party with which it wished to partner in creating such an arbitral mechanism.
What's the nature of some of those disputes? Are they purely matters of commerce, or are they some human rights violations there? I mean, China was notorious for those sweatshops that they would have, and a number of other factors. What's the nature of the disputes?
No, the nature is predominantly commercial and investment. People enter into contracts and they have different views as to how those contracts should be performed, how they should be interpreted. There's a question of performance. Does the performance match what was promised? That sort of commercial dispute is what we're talking about.
And do you think this is worth noting and rolling out perhaps to our other trade partners, those who we don't have such agreements?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. At the present moment, the problem in Africa is that its commercial disputes, which are being resolved by arbitration, are being resolved in Europe, so that Africa is having its commercial disputes subcontracted out to a different continent. And it means that Africa is not developing its own skills pool in arbitration, although Africa has that clear ability to resolve its own disputes. And this CAJAC, the China-Africa Joint Arbitration Centre, will, I hope, be a pioneer for all of Africa in its dealings both with China and with other international partners, because there is no reason at all why these disputes should not be dealt with in South Africa and in Africa.
Have there been any disputes thus far, or is it still early days?
We've just established the institution. We've just opened its doors.
Yeah.
But I've little doubt that within the near future, the dispute flow will commence.
And do you think it will come more from China or from South Africa and Africa?
It should be pretty even.
Yeah.
China is obviously the dominant party in many of these transactions because it's the investing party in many cases. But, South Africa also invests, and it invests not only in China, it invests in Africa. And in all those aspects, this institution will provide an essential service to business.
Now, I'm just going to take advantage of the fact that you're here. President Jacob Zuma mentioned that he wants the nature of the relationship between South Africa and China to change a little bit from being one that was predominantly the extraction of resources from Africa or South Africa and taken to China to be developed, to one where there's beneficiation and more advantages for South Africa. At the moment, do you think there can really be a symbiotic relationship between Africa and China when it comes to trading?
Yes, I do. But of course, it depends what level you're talking about. I'm talking about the level of a shared jurisprudence between China and Africa, whereby whether you're a Chinese business person or an African business person, you have trust in a mutually shared institution which will bring fairness and equity into trading relationships. So that on that aspect, I see no reason at all why there shouldn't be a fair and equal partnership between the Chinese legal communities and the South African legal communities in support of business and financial transactions.
Thank you so much, Senior Counsel Advocate Michael Kuper. It's been a huge pleasure chatting to you this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for watching. Quick ad break. When we come back, it will be 7 o'clock. Time for your news. Stay with us.